Hi everyone. So I'm really grateful to be here for one. I'm Sam Machell, at Brownie Cove on Instagram and at Sam Behind Glass on Twitter. But I was asked to be here because I'm half of the two-person team, the Sand Gardeners, and myself and Colin Leduc in France, make sort of weird little narrative games, which I'll show you some of later. I'm also a writer and an artist, so game development is not my primary thing, and it's certainly not the route I expected to take. So hopefully my story might be relatable. This talk more broadly is about publishing and about taking your games to the public. So over the next sort of 20 minutes, I hope to show how you could publish your game on the platform itch.io. Also, why you would want to publish your game, because going first in this program, I'd like to kind of talk about why you might want to make work and publish it at all. And I want to look towards some arts and counterculture references to illustrate how we can think about publishing as some kind of artistic act in itself. So I'd like to start by talking about my own creative journey and how I ended up doing what I am doing. In 2015, a friend and I started a Facebook page called Brownie Cove, which we used like this kind of casual webcomic. And although I was younger and my work has changed quite a lot since, I would probably consider this my first publishing project and one of my first real projects at all. Basically, we would upload these sort of silly, maybe funny, maybe not funny, Microsoft Paint kind of looking comics. And we discussed, like, before we set this up, that what we wanted to do really was build this fiction, but not in a way where anything was concrete. So what we did was just uploaded whatever we were making and decided what things meant and if they connected later. We were both going through some stuff at the time, and we used the page as like kind of like a personal coping mechanism. And because of this, some of the comics were really deep or personal or emotional, and there was a real sense of urgency, I think, to the whole project from idea to execution, and everything was done super quick. I think this is reflected in the messy visual style, but it's also like reflected in that these comics lived on Facebook and responded in a way to comments we were getting and things like that. And as this like fan base grew, there started to be this demand for longer stories in the Brownie Cove universe, which you can see in the top left. I was starting to get towards that kind of thing. Yes. And so after working on Brownie Cove for about a year, my friend left the project and bequeathed the page to me. And I remember at the time I was getting a little bit tired of drawing and working with comics, but I wanted to continue building on the Brownie Cove world. And I think I remember seeing about this tool called Twine, which you will get shown soon. And I wanted to give Twine a go. And so over a week, I kind of taught myself and made this Twine game here. This is a screen of it, which expanded on a location in the comics called the Brownie Cove Hotel. And, you know, looking at this now, it's not like something I would make these days, but I don't think it really matters at all. Like, for one, I don't think it matters whether or not you yourself like what you make. I think lots of artists don't like what they make. And then also, a project you're not happy with could be seen by the right person and lead you into the right situation, which is totally what happened here, because a few days after I uploaded this game, I received a message from someone who described himself as a programmer. And he said he liked this Twine game and wondered if I was interested in working together. And I said yes, and we're still partners today. This was Colin Leduc, and we've been working together for the last 3 or 4 years or whatever, remotely. So soon after I received this message, we started working together on some larger projects. We started planning a continuation of the Twine game, but we would turn it into more of a kind of graphic point and click, you know, graphical point and click adventure game that would again build on this world of the Brownie Cove Hotel. I had never ever made a game before. I was studying art at the time on my art foundation year, and Colin suggested that we work together on a game jam so that I could kind of get familiar with the whole process and like each stage of production. And also so that he could teach me the ins and outs of working collaboratively with someone. And what we ended up making in this game jam, we did the Ludum Dare for, we did the 72-hour version. So it was a kind of long weekend. And we made this game that's kind of like Papers, Please, called Cash Bags, where you're behind a desk at the hotel and you have to check in guests and answer phone calls. And it's a bit of a wacky kind of silly game, and it's quite intentionally quite stressful. And there's this, you know, overarching dark storyline for players to find. And it really was total luck that this game kind of came together at all. And I'm aware that most people's first jam experiences is not necessarily so smooth, but for me, working on a jam really made me realize that making games was something I wanted to do, and it was our ways of working clicked into place. And this game actually, despite it being our first one, really found some success and was written about in PC Gamer and played by some small-time Let's Players, and was also licensed and published by Armour Games a couple years ago. The next game we wanted to make was a bit more minimal. We kind of really overworked ourselves on Cash Bags. So, I mean, I think this is a classic thing of overscoping a game for a jam. But we still wanted to build on the world of the Brownie Cove Hotel and continue the story we'd started to tell just in a less intense way. The game we made was called Between Stations, and instead of there being all this behind the desk gameplay, instead this is a game about watching TV in your hotel room alone, and all the player does is scroll back and forth along the bottom to find different channels, and then they read choice, multiple choice descriptions about what's going on each station. And an opportunity came up for us to exhibit this game as part of the Left Field collection at EGX Res. And Colin and I talked about like what it would be like if we exhibited this slow narrative game where people read about being on their own, and what it would be like to show that when we're competing in the same space for people's attention with like Call of Duty over here or whatever. And we thought that what we would do maybe would be like turn it into a kind of theatrical experience. So we, I don't know, I noticed that whenever there's all this cutting edge new tech, a piece of old tech surrounded by all that new tech gains all the attention. And so we built this controller, which is on the right-hand side of this old TV here, with buttons and a little dial. So the player can literally dial between the different stations and stuff. And yeah, the kind of physical controls and the old tech really drew people in. And we seem to kind of discover a different side to people who might not want to play a narrative game normally. So like a few kids even played this game the whole way through to completion. And it's not a game for kids. It's not like a game for adults, but it's not a game for kids, but we had that interaction. And so showing this game kind of opened my eyes to, you know, thinking about distribution of games and showcasing of games in a slightly different way, and what form might work best for you, you know. So to pull back now, I'd just like to talk about the word publish for a bit of context. The word publishing comes from the Latin publicare, which means to make public. And later it came to mean to generally make known. So I would suggest maybe like rather than us thinking of publishing as something like book printing or like game distribution, maybe we could think of publishing more generally as bringing something to the attention of the public. Of course, book printing is a key part of this, and you know the history is kind of interesting, at least to me. So going back in time a bit, a few hundred years ago, right, the industrial printing press was invented, and prior to this, books were kind of just produced by the church, like by hand. And so really the only books produced for a while were religious texts. And this meant that the church kind of became a gatekeeper of knowledge and authority within Europe. But when the printing press came, this kind of started to dwindle. But initially the technology is expensive and therefore limited to the production of certain texts, like legal texts or aristocratic texts or fiction towards a certain taste. Eventually, like, technology changed such that quicker productions could be printed, which gave rise to newspapers. But again, like, these are kind of expensive bits of kit, these big old presses. And so the printing press, like the newspapers become their own voices of authority. And this is, like, you know, a phenomenon we're still aware of to a certain extent. And it wasn't really like until the photocopier that printing was democratized, by which I mean made open and accessible and available to a wider public. Like with the photocopier, people could, artists could band together and buy their own printing machine, or people could print their own books like secretly on their boss's time while they're at work or something. So it's kind of like a much more open phenomena. You might be familiar with the term zine, which is like, you know, describes a sort of homemade, often short magazine. And this trend really took off with the invention of photocopiers. And, you know, back in the in the 90s or whatever, became a real core part of fandom culture and punk culture. So I think it's interesting to look at zines in comparison to the internet, because we see a lot of similarities. Zines were usually made in small quantities and distributed locally or by hand. Often the material was appropriated, which kind of means like copied from somewhere else in a certain way. Often the material was radical in some regard, which is why these people would make their publications outside of the limitations of the normal printing press production. And I think zines often have this kind of visual quality of the handmade about them. Like you can see obvious cutting and pastings here. You can see handwriting next to, you know, printed text. And this example is from feminist collective movement Riot Girl from the 90s. And they're a great example here. They developed their own zine network to distribute their publications, and their publications were all too, at the time, kind of radical to be printed in you know, normal books or whatever. Sadly, I think the zine has kind of become a different kind of thing now. It's kind of a commodity in a certain way, and the word maybe means less. Like you can go to the Tate Modern and they will call their exhibition catalogue a zine. So, but the history, I think, is kind of angry and really rich and gnarly and fun to look to. But I also think maybe this process of publishing doesn't have to be, you know, print. So artist Jenny Holzer works with text and works with text distribution in different ways. So for example, this work, which is on one of these marquees outside of a cinema, or she would distribute text by projecting it really huge on a building, printing it on a t-shirt and having people wear it to a protest, or on LED screens like this. And again, like Riot Girl, I think this kind of subversion of the publishing process feels really angry and feels really urgent. In the essay, which I'll provide a link to at the end, on the power of mutual aid publishing during crises, Paul Solelis talks about the way we witnessed people collecting and organizing virtually during the first COVID lockdown. And, you know, we started to see these like Google Sheets with lots of open source information. We saw all of these open letters to MPs and letter templates, and we saw protests happening in Animal Crossing. And the kind of unifying thing behind all of this stuff that we started to see last year was the urgency. And in this essay, Paul calls it urgent craft. And I think that's a really lovely word. And maybe these things don't even have to look like what we imagine an artwork or a piece of protest could look like. Maybe it could just be like, I don't know, like a streamed lecture like this, or an open access workshop or whatever. And yeah, so I hope that this has kind of just illustrated quickly how like fractured and diverse the concept of publishing is, and also kind of how urgent publishing is. But you're probably wondering why, like, what I'm on about and how this connects to video games. So what is publishing when we're talking about games? Is it like AAA publishing or indie publishing companies? Or is it like distribution of games like on discs or like on cartridges or in arcade machines? Or maybe we're talking about storefronts like the eShop or Steam. And all three of these different types of game publishing are kind of closed off and maybe seem a bit secretive or impenetrable. I know that they did to me. And there's also often a financial blockade involved in these kinds of, you know, the big publishers. Like Steam, for example, will let anyone publish, but as long as they pay $100. And so, yeah, kind of not as accessible as maybe it seems. So I wonder if there are any examples of counterculture publishing or like artistic publishing projects in games. Oh yeah, totally. So we'll talk about itch.io now. So if you're not familiar, itch.io is an independent website that allows users to upload and sell their games or to download and buy games. It's primarily focused on providing an infrastructure for like independent developers to self-publish, but it is also strong in other ways. You can decide whether or not you want to charge for your work. You can also like set the price yourself. You can set how much revenue share you want to give yourself. I think itch can be a great place to build like communities and networks. The site supports detailed development blogs, as you can see, like it says devlogs in the top left there. And it also supports different levels of community interaction that you can set at your own discretion. So Colin and I have like made some good friends and colleagues through sharing our games on itch. I do think it's a good platform for that. And it can also be used like to host or take part in jams. You see there's this like jam tab at the top, and there's always like at least 5 jams going on at any time. So it can be really great to like find new games or challenge yourself with a new idea or connect with other people. And just because jams are so present on itch, I think there's less of an expectation for games to be polished and perfect, and there's more of an embracing of the rough and ready games or experiments or prototypes. And existing outside of the traditional publishing route, and providing this like infrastructure for marginalized creators, I think we could really see itch to be like the zines of the traditional printing system. And I'm going to take us off the rails now and show you how easy it is to upload a game to itch. This is the, oh, can I get a thumbs up that you can still see all this, Chris? Cool. This is Colin and I's like homepage for the Sand Gardeners games. The itch homepages can be customized. I didn't do that because I don't know how to do HTML, but I just wanted to show you the possibilities. And in here, I've created this test game. So when you're ready to upload your game, which you will be hopefully within the next few weeks, right? You'll make your account on itch up in the top right. You can see I'm logged in here. Down here under create, which is where your developer tools will be, you can just click this to upload a new project. It'll open up in a window like this, but I've got my Blue Peter prepared already one here. And I'll just walk through. It's super easy, but I'm going to walk through each bit by bit. So here's where you put your title. You kind of have to do that first, otherwise it doesn't let you upload a game. So don't forget that, like I did. You can give it a custom URL down here, a short description, and this is what appears down here where you see we've got the years for our games. That's where your description will appear. You get to choose how you want to describe what you're uploading. And this is actually, I did forget to mention this, but this is another thing I really like about Itch, which is that not everything on here is games. There's a lot of kind of diversity of form for what people make. Okay, this bit's important. If your game is a downloadable game, it will already have been selected in this drop down here. If your game is a Twine game or another kind of like HTML game, you need to click this bit before you upload your game. Here you can choose to say whether or not the game is out or not. And I think this is really nice because you can be quite upfront and say that a game is a prototype and just like set people's expectations, or I think this is a really nice feature. So I've put no payments, self-explanatory. And then when you're ready to upload your game, let me delete this so that we can do this from the start. Yeah, okay. So when you're ready to upload your game, it will either be like if you're uploading an HTML game, you'll either be uploading a zip or a .html file. Here's my one for a little Twine game I made earlier. Simple. If it's an HTML game, you'll then need to click this fill in here to show that the game is going to load up in the browser. If not, you'll click what platform the game is. It's all really straightforward, but this is where you'll click to show if it's a Windows, a Linux, a Mac, or an Android game. We'll click this browser one here for now. The game's going to be embedded in the page, sure, and it actually automatically detected and set this. And then down here you have the space for your description, which I've showed you can format it a little bit, and you can add images and that. You can set your genre, add some tags. I find it's really great to add the game engine as a tag, often with like these engines like Twine or Ink or Bitsy. There are communities of creators and fans that just like those games, and so they'll come to you if you do that, I've found. And if you don't want Itch to call it a game, you can come up with your own noun for Itch to describe you with. So I just want to show you how that all looks. There we go. And here's the Twine game. So as you can see, that was super easy, right? And when you're in your game page here, you can come up here to click Edit Theme, and this is where you'll be able to customize how like the game's page looks visually. Again, it's all straightforward, and if you're good at HTML, you'll be able to do even more. But I don't know how to do that, so that's where my knowledge stops. I hope I've kind of covered that, but I don't know. So I'm really keen to jump into questions if that's cool.
I was just looking for the unmute button. This is all really cool and straightforward. Thanks a lot for that. So folks, do start posting your questions using the Q&A button, and we're going to answer them. And I would just like to mention that you can ask us about anything, from Sam's experience or about publishing or about zines. Um, in addition to each related questions, I think there's a lot of really cool features that each has, and above everything, it has to be the community of developers and of players that are on itch. And I wondered if, while we're waiting for the questions to start coming in, if you could tell us a bit more about your experiences with the itch community and maybe something memorable that happened in the past.
Mm. Oh, well, I don't know. I have to think. I think, well, hmm. I was a fan of games on itch before I started uploading games on itch, I think. And maybe one of the things that was surprising or memorable to me was that a developer I really liked called Color Fiction found, we discovered we were both mutual fans of each other, and then got in contact after we. There's a feature on itch where you can leave reviews of games and a star rating and a little comment, and those reviews, as far as I'm aware, aren't ever public, so it feels kind of like a really lovely message you can leave a developer. And I've had some really special things in there, so I think that's a lovely feature.
Hmm. We have a couple of questions. So the first one is from an anonymous attendee, and I thought it was a really good one to start with. I'm completely new to this, so can you explain what a game jam actually is? Would you like to give your perspective to it, and then I'll go a little bit into the actual story jam.
Yeah, so a game jam is an event in which, over a set period of time, people will often respond to a theme and come up with and make a game in an amount of time. So the Ludum Dare is a very big game jam that happens online, but there are also jams that happen in person. Maybe Chris, you could talk about the story jam now.
Yeah, so I'm just going to paste a link in chat. This is the link to the story jam. As I said, this is going to happen between the 19th and the 22nd of February. And the whole idea is that on the 19th of February, we're going to release a theme. And then everybody who wants to take part can just make a game using the kits provided, one of the 4 kits provided, to tell a story. So the reason why we wanted to create the Elevate program, our Elevate project this way, is because we wanted to empower you to tell your story. And we create these 4 kits, Twine, Charisma, Ink, and Make Code Arcade, in order to do that. They each offer different features, and they're all slightly different. So for example, Sam talked a little bit about Twine. It's a game engine in the browser. You just drag things around to tell your story. It's very narrative, very much like a choose your own adventure book, right? Um, and it's as simple as saving the file and then putting that on itch, and you can tell your story. With Charisma, what we really enjoyed about that is that it's a game that you make. So it's an engine, again, browser, very similar to Twine, just slightly more features. So instead of being able to just have yes and no answers, it reacts organically to what you say. So you can just type maybe or I don't know. And even though it might not have taken those into account as exactly as you've written them, it actually reacts to them. So that's really cool. And you make the game in the browser and then you play the game on your phone. Then with Ink, that's a bit more programmery, so it's not visual. You just type the code, and you create a choose your own adventure game. And then with Make Code Arcade, everything is very visual based. So the way that the story jam is going to work is we're going to ask everybody who participates to join us on Discord if they want to join in the community for the 19th of February. We release the theme, and then over the 4 days, you make a game using those kits, and then you upload them on the page, and then our judges are going to play the games, and they're going to give a few awards. But all of the games are going to be showcased on the main Game Anglia Elevate website. Does this answer your question? I think so. There's also going to be people around to support you if you have any questions. We're all going to be on Discord for those few days. Do feel free to just ask another question just to let us know if you if this answered your question. Right. We have a question from Delano. Sam, what was the first game you ever created on itch?
That would have been so the Twine game that I showed as my first game is on the Sand Gardeners itch page. It's called First Morning, and it's playable as it was when I put that together on my own. The game that came after was Cash Bags, and again, that's on the itch, so you can play chronologically if you like.
Cool. We have a question from Bogdan. I like the redefining of publishing based on the dictionary, but in this perspective, what would be some ways you can think of to get your game seen by the people who might get it? Since itch.io has a lot more games than basically any other platform.
It's true that itch has a lot of games. I don't know if it has way more than any others, but I think being good at doing your tags well, choosing your genre well. I think the tags is definitely how people found my games. I would also say that posting on itch, you can expect maybe more than large numbers of people. I think you can expect fewer numbers of people who do get it. I think that in general, there's the player base on itch is quite curious and generous from what I found. But I'm also very much not someone that knows anything about marketing, and I'm not very good at getting people to see my games, so I can't really answer that fully.
I'd also like to mention that for the bigger game jams, so for the Ludum Dares that Sam mentioned, and for a bunch of others like the Adventure X game jam, I think you do have people who are going to create let's plays of all of
Yeah.
the games which are being uploaded.
I think that's a great point, and actually that is how Colin and I's games first started being covered, was when someone who was playing all of the games from that jam did a video of ours, and then someone else did a video, and it kind of just started steamrolling like that. So definitely jams is a good way of getting people to look at your games.
We have a question from
Mm.
Michael. To Sam, you stated that the artists tend to dislike their work, assuming that at some point you may have had the same feeling of disliking your work. My question is, does an artist or developer dislike their work because it didn't come out the way they wanted, or simply because they believe there is room for improvement? I think
Yeah,
this is a really good
totally.
question.
I feel both of those things. I think that because often if you're creating something, you have an image in your head of a dream version of what it could be. And that dream thing never ever is real. It's always a dream. That's what I find. And so maybe I'm always comparing what I've done to what I wish I'd done. But also, yeah, because you're an artist and you're closer to it, maybe you're more intimate with what you perceive to be the thing's problems or whatever. That's how I feel about what I do.
Cool. A question from Nathan. If I make a game using Unreal, can I upload it to itch?
Yes, perhaps I should have been more clear. The itch supports all, as far as if your game is an executable, or an application, a .exe for Windows or a .app for Mac, then it can be put on itch. Doesn't matter what engine you use. I use Twine as an example specifically because I know that that's something you folks will be covering.
Yeah. So from specifically from the Elevate program and the Story Jam perspective, we will ask you to create a game using one of the engines that we are using. So again, those are going to be Twine, Charisma, AI, Ink, and Make Code Arcade. We specifically didn't want to go for Unity or Unreal because they are not necessarily beginner friendly. And we believe that the engines that we've chosen provide a good amount of complexity. So, for example, one thing, Sam, that you didn't mention is that Twine also accepts custom scripts using, I think, Java or JavaScript, where you are able to program and do some really funky stuff with Twine. And Maz and Dai are going to be going a bit more in depth into that if you join us for the using Twine, the Twine kit to make a game workshop, which is on the 9th of February. And also, I wanted to answer Eldred's question of why have we chosen to use itch specifically? And the answer for that is because anybody can upload the game on itch for free and make an account on itch for free. So we wanted to make this as accessible as possible. Also, all 4 of the engines that we've used are accessible for free. So yeah, for us, it was just making it as accessible as possible. Sam, why did Sam Gardeners choose to use itch as their
Again,
medium of
because it's
publishing?
free is the first reason. When we started, and well, the main reason I suppose is that there's integration with itch into most game jams, and so the first jam we did was the Ludum Dare, and the Ludum Dare recommends you put your game to itch and let it be discovered that way. We also knew that there was a large community of narrative game creators and fans on itch, and that our work might be received better there than, say, Steam, which has a different kind of audience or expectations, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the communities are different between itch and and Steam. So Jez mentioned that you do need to contact itch if you need more than 1 GB of space in terms of uploads, which won't be the case for us. And also, Jez said that Twine accepts JavaScript and CSS. Yes, that is what I meant. Thank you for that, Jez. We also have a question from Jez. So one of the things that strikes me as a tutor is that it's often difficult for younger students to break out of looking only at games that they want to play or like to play. So how important is it, would you say, if you want to become a developer, to start looking at all types of games?
Well, that's a tough question. I would say that it is important, and maybe I'm only saying that because I basically just play games that aren't at all like what I make. I'm a big fan of Minecraft and Guitar Hero, for example. So I don't know. I think I don't have a good answer to that, though, I'm afraid. Sorry about that, Jez.
From my end, I found it really useful to play games, to play any types of games, like short games and long games. And I find that I do learn from everything that I've played as a game dev. So Judah, you asked if I have developed a game before. Yes, I have. So I used to work for Ubisoft and as a game designer, and then I worked with a couple of indie companies. I released games on Steam and on Android and iOS, and I still like to make games and nice interactive experiences in my own time, even if I'm no longer a full-time dev. A question from Harry: how long does it take to make a game or to make your game?
Well, luckily, because all of the games that we have uploaded on our page are games that we made in jams, I can answer that every one of those games took 72 hours to make. And then the sad reality of the flip side is that the game that we're making not in a jam, the large game that we've been making for the last few years, is not finished yet, and it's been taking years. So, but yeah, 72 hours for all the others, though. That's the main.
Cool. Thanks a lot for that. I am wary of the time, so I'm just going to ask folks to send any questions that they might have now, so we can get through them, and then we can finish the talk on time. We have a few more. So something that um, so Bogdan, yes, we are recording this talk, and the talk will be posted both on our YouTube at Game Anglia and on the elevate.gameanglia.co.uk website. So something that I did want to mention is that if you have any questions about the Elevate program and the story jam, or if you don't really know where to start when you're developing your game for the Elevate game jam, and generally if you want to learn more about that, you can contact us at hello@gameanglia.co.uk, especially if you've never made a game before and you just want to learn where to start. And you can also follow us on Twitter. um, Going back to questions, in your experience from Michael, how much has it helped receiving feedback from people who have played your games?
Um, yeah, it's useful. I think that I also I know obviously during COVID times this isn't possible as well, but I've also found it really great to receive feedback by watching people playing the games in person. I think that both written comments can be useful, and so can watching people play. Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to mention that the next talk in the program is one about giving and receiving feedback. So if you want to join it, it's going to be next Thursday from 6 p.m., just like today. And we are joined by game design director Mark Ogilvy from Jagex and by lead environment artist Laura Dillaway from Roll7. So that should be a really cool talk that I'm looking forward to. A question from Miguel. Are you guys thinking about doing new or challenger games? So I think the question is, do you have anything new planned for Sand Gardeners, Sam?
Yes, we're currently working on two games. One is a psychedelic first-person nightclub simulator, and the other is a dice game about trying to trying to keep your farm working while a dragon is stealing all of your food. We're working on quite a lot at the moment. Yeah.
That's really cool. Really looking forward to those. Um, a question from Mark. So one thing that I do want to stress is that after you leave the talk and after I end it, you should get a pop-up window, basically with a short survey asking you how you found the session. Please take your time and do fill that in because it is helping us a lot, and it's going to inform us on how we continue and improve this program. So question from Mark. Would publishing a game on itch count as experience toward a game design career, for example in terms of experience or a game design job or something that you can use on your CV?
Yeah, I think that from what I understand, I think something that dev studios really value is proof that you've put a game out and made one from start to finish and released it. That shows just so much like determination and just great qualities. And totally, I think if you can show that you've made some games, that's really great experience.
Yeah, I would like to second that. So we work quite a lot with college and university students, and putting your game on itch is going to be no different than putting your game on Steam when it comes to people looking at your CVs, especially if you can show one what you've done on the game, so showing your process, and two showing what you've learned. So generally having, like Sam showed us, a portfolio page with all of your games on itch is going to be extremely useful, especially if you add some text around each game saying what you've done on it and what your thought process was and what you've learned. So it definitely counts towards your CV and portfolio. Yep. And this doesn't necessarily apply just to game design. It also applies to audio and to art, to producing, and all of the other disciplines in between. Um, Michael, Chris, in terms of experience, did you enjoy more working for Ubisoft or for the Indian industry? It depends. I enjoyed both in equal measure, but different ways. So Ubisoft was great to see what can be done and to learn to specialize in one direction, as well as learning to work with like huge teams. So that really helped in terms of communication. With indies, it's more along you learn to wear a lot of hats. So you're the game designer and the producer and the project manager, for example, or you might be like the programmer and the social media manager. In another example, they're both fun, and I enjoyed working in both of them, and I think both of them are valuable experiences. Um, a question: what's your favorite genre of games to develop, Sam?
Well, I would have used to have said sort of narrative games because I'm mainly a writer. That was what I mainly did. But I've really been enjoying like pushing myself to not primarily do that. So the roguelike we're working on, I've really enjoyed making because it's involved me like, actually rolling dice and trying to think about games a little bit more. And I really enjoyed that. So maybe that.
Cool. And then two more questions. Sorry, there's only one more question. Does create this is a really good one to end on. Does
Mhm.
creating games ever take the fun out of playing them, or is it more the opposite?
Well, I don't know. A lot of developers I know don't play games, but I do, and I think I enjoy them more than before because even the tiny little things I'm in, especially in AAA games now, a tiny little detail I'll notice and be like, wow, I am impressed by that. And that's something I didn't have before I tried making games, I think. So I think I appreciate games more. Maybe I don't know if I have more fun though. What about you, Chris?
I think I'm on the same page where I understand the games quite a bit more, and I really enjoy the little details more, and I can actually see them from a different perspective. So I've worked on an open world, very systemic game. And then when I played Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, which was a systemic open world game, I was able to see the systems and understand them for the effort of the people that created them. So that really has shown me a different way of looking at things. It's the same as I imagine as when you are a painter and then you start looking at canvases and at paintings a different way, more at the technique than necessarily the overall experience. Um, so yeah, this question was from an anonymous attendee. Thanks a lot for asking that. And I think the last one, and after this will be done. As developers, did you enjoy from Eldred? Did you enjoy the journey of developing the games you make, or enjoy the final product of the game? Sam, I'll let you answer this one first.
Hmm. Uh, well, that depends. I'll be honest, and this is maybe a, a devilish admittance that I don't play our games once they're done. I don't even, there are some of our games that I've not played, but so I would say I more enjoy the process, and that goes for the other things I do besides games, except when we've made these like physical installation versions. Um, the way that works for us is that Colin does the electronics in France, and then we'll come together to put the whole thing together. And in that case, the final thing is really like special for us because it's we've come together and we've made this thing that we can hold, and that feels really great. I wonder about you though, Chris, if you.
Very similar. So I enjoy the process of making games, definitely, and going through all of the different iterations. It can be frustrating. So one of the things that I would say is that when you make games, you do need to get used to change, and you need to get used to your ideas not making it into the final version of the game. So you need to no longer you need to not be precious about your ideas and precious about your work. It's more about working with other people and working for the benefit of the greater thing, which is the product itself, the game, which was never going to be finished. Like, don't kid yourselves, no game is ever released in a finished state. Games are released when they're good enough. And then I do get a lot of enjoyment from watching people play the games. So
Yes, agree.
um going to expose and actually showcasing a game and seeing other people play it and enjoy it, and especially as a game designer, seeing them fall on those beats and follow the beats, the emotional beats that you designed, that's really, really great. It can also be frustrating when they don't do exactly what you want them to do, which is, frustrating but still fun. And then it's the same when you see like reviewers reviewing games that you've worked on and being like, oh yeah, I really like this, or things like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed that bits of it as well. Okay, I think this is all we have time for, folks. Sam, do you have any closing words?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
And I look forward
everybody
to seeing
for
what
joining.
everyone makes. I'm going to be checking in on the website. I'd like to have a look at what everyone does in the jam for sure. Really exciting.
We'll definitely send you the games as well.